My name is Brent Taylor, and I am in love with this game. This game is called Low Fantasy Gaming. I'm holding the deluxe edition here in my hands, right here. It's a beautiful 300-page book packed with some amazing content. I was in the market just a few weeks ago for a low fantasy game, sort of in the vein of like Conan or Lankmar, that sort of thing. And I was just having a hard time finding something that really fit the bill. D&D 5e being far too high powered. You're playing superheroes in medieval Europe. Castles and Crusades, despite being one of my personal favorite games, is just still too high fantasy. And I couldn't really find anything that filled that void until I ran across this actually sort of randomly, and man, could I not be happier. When I think of low fantasy, I think of Hyboria. I think of that world where magic is very, very rare. It's terrifying. It's powerful. It is almost always corrupting, and people will run from it and they'll kill for it. And that's this game in spades. Um, I could not be happier with it. I'm using it for an open table game I'm running. I'm looking forward to running some domain play for another group of players. And honestly, this is a game I'm likely to be playing for at least the next few years, maybe far, far, far longer. There is a new companion. The Kickstarter for the new book just finished, I believe, a week ago. Definitely be looking forward to that. Reading through this game and what's going to be included in the new companion book, I swear it's like Pickpocket Press took the rules cyclopedia and went, we can do this, but we can make it low fantasy. And in some ways, man, did they improve on it. The exploration rules, the siege rules in this game, the way it actually does mass combat is just absolutely amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Stephen Gradzicki, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm so sorry if I'm not. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does with domain play rules. I love his take on so many things in the rules cyclopedia in here that I just can't wait to see it. So I'm going to be doing a number of videos here covering things like how to create a character, what the martial exploits are, how they work, how attribute roles work, and why I find this game not only so fascinating but so amazingly fun and so conducive to really, really good cohesive group play and role play. In a world where your choices absolutely matter, and I just couldn't be happier with this. So let's get started here. Let's start by making a character. So for our first character, let's go with something really simple. Let's start with a human barbarian. Now, anytime you're creating a character at level 1, there are just going to be a few fields that are always going to be the same. Things like your dark and dangerous magic counter, your luck score, and your reroll score. We'll start filling all that out before we start rolling any of your attributes or anything else like that. But first, let's start with the name. So we are building this guy over here. We'll call him Eldrick. We know he's a human, Vornari. He's from the Midlands. We know he's going to be a barbarian, so let's just fill that out. We are starting at level 1. And while we're at it, let's fill out his background. We know for a fact he's going to be from Vorngard. So, as is common in Vorngard right now, we're finding a lot of people are turning to farming and new ways of doing things, turning away from the old ways. So we'll have him be a farmer too. Let's arrange it all so we can actually see it on this character sheet here. And a few more things we need to fill out. So things that are going to be common are the luck, reroll score, and dark and dangerous magic counter. Luck is always going to start at 11, at level 1 anyway. Your reroll score is always going to be equal to your level. And your dark and dangerous magic counter starts at 1. Next, let's talk about attributes. These are very similar to just about any version of D&D you've ever played, with a few slight changes. You have your typical attributes like strength and dexterity, but unlike D&D, we don't have wisdom. Instead, we have willpower and perception. These attributes are used for many of the same things that D&D usually uses them for. But instead of using the modifier for most things, we actually use the raw score, as low fantasy gaming is in fact a roll under system. So let's say you have a 15 in strength. You would roll a bare d20 or 20-sided die, and you'd try to roll under or equal to 15. Now, you roll these scores or come up with these scores the same way you normally do with most versions of D&D. You roll 4d6 or 4 6-sided dice, and you drop the lowest die. And you just do this in any order you want. Most people just do a pool of values and then put them wherever they want. In our case, we're rolling a barbarian, so we'll probably want our highest value in something like Constitution. Let's start with rolling our scores. The most important thing to note about this is that every character at level 1 has one score that starts with 15 by default. So you don't even have to roll that. So you're only rolling 6 scores. So let's start with our 15. And let's start rolling our scores here. So first 46, and we roll an 11. A 10. A 9. A 17. Another 10. And one more. A 12. So being as this is Barbarian, we probably want to put our highest score in Constitution. So let's put our 17 in Constitution here. We'll put our 15 in Strength. Let's put our 12 in Perception. 11 Willpower. 10 in Dexterity. Another 10 in Charisma, as we'll be using that for intimidation checks and the like. And, well, we're a typical barbarian. We're not very smart. Next up is figuring out our modifiers. Now, our modifiers aren't used for very much, but they are used for things like weapon attacks, figuring out your AC score, your hit points, and that sort of thing. So it does not use the typical modifier math that you find from D&D 5e. In fact, it uses something a little less generous. But there is a nice chart in the book right here. So we'll just fill those out one at a time here. So our strength is 15. So 15 would be a +2. And then our dexterity is a 10, which would be +0. Our constitution is at 17, which is an amazing +3. Intelligence of 9, not great, but at least we're not getting any negative modifiers. A willpower of 11, again, +0. Same with perception and charisma. Now, these next two columns, GS and TF, stand for great success and terrible failure. Low fantasy gaming has this amazing idea of degrees of success. So it's not just that you succeed or that you fail. Sometimes you get a great success or a terrible failure on the roll, and you get sort of appropriate results. Now, these aren't used for every roll. They're sort of at the GM discretion, but they're one of my personal favorite parts of the system. I really like this. So now the downside is it's one of the crunchier aspects of the system as well. Anytime that your attributes change, these have to be recalculated, and there is some math involved. And if you're using one of the variant rules in, I believe, the companion book that is coming out, anytime you get a bonus to your roll, these also have to be modified. And again, there's some math involved, so there's some crunch here. Now, I'm going to show you how to actually do that math and how to derive these values. But thankfully, Pickpocket Press has come out with a new character sheet, or is about to come out with a new character sheet. I'm not exactly sure. That has this amazing little chart here that I've fallen in love with that does the math for us automatically, so we can just sort of adjust this on the fly as necessary, and it's much, much easier to do. So first, let's see how to actually derive these values. So great success and terrible failure, you're calculating this for each and every one of your attributes. So let's just start with strength. So your great success is derived by taking your strength attribute score here, dividing it by 2, and rounding down. So in this case, it would be 7. And terrible failure is derived by taking your attribute score and multiplying it by 1.5. Now this does cap out at 20. So in this case, you would put 20 here as well. Now, the best way of doing this is just use this handy dandy little chart over here. And if you don't have access to this character sheet yet, because it just hasn't been released yet and it's not on DriveThruRPG or on the Low Fantasy Gaming website, you can certainly make this chart yourself. It's very, very simple to do. I'm just going to fill these out and we're going to fast forward through it. Okay, so now that we have our attributes all filled out, let's start calculating our hit points. So we're rolling a Barbarian, and a Barbarian's hit points are defined as 1d6, or 1 6-sided die, plus 6, plus your con bonus. Now in our case, we have this rather massive con bonus over here, at plus 3. So let's fill that out. Okay. Put that right there. Now, at first level, unless the GM decides otherwise, all characters start at max health. So in our case, we'll take a d6, add 6 to it, so 12, plus our con bonus for 15. And we'll just fill it in right here. Next, let's move on to your abilities and skills. So at first level, the Barbarian gets 2 abilities, Ferocious Rage and Born to the Wilds. Ferocious Rage is similar to that of 5th edition. You're a Barbarian, you rage. You get bonuses to your attack and strength checks, that sort of thing. You also get a bonus to damage, I believe. In addition, Born to the Wilds allows you to get advantage on any sort of wilderness lore checks. And we'll get into that in a minute. So let's get our abilities on the character sheet first. Ferocious Rage and Born to the Wilds. Next, let's talk about your skills. Barbarians naturally start with 2 really important skills, Animal Lore and Wilderness Lore. These are the 2 big survival skills in the game in a lot of regards. Very important, very useful, especially if you're playing in the Midlands. In addition to that, you get your choice of 4 other skills. We're going to choose Gather Information, Athletics, Deception, and Persuasion. Gather information is sort of your general skill whenever you're trying to find information in a city or looking in a library or something else like that. You're a barbarian. You're probably not going to be looking in libraries too often, but you never know if you're going to be looking at stone tablets, monoliths, that sort of thing. Athletics, That one should be pretty obvious. You're a barbarian, you're going to be doing some pretty amazing stunts. And this game has some really amazing ways for you to go about doing that with martial exploits. Your deception and persuasion skills, these are things like your intimidation checks and the ability to lie and get NPCs to believe you, that sort of thing. Very, very useful. But do look over the skill list in the game, as there are quite a few of them, and they have a huge variety of uses. Unlike 5th edition, where you're basically playing superheroes in medieval Europe, in this game, you're not a superhero. You're on the lower end of the curve. It's a very, very lethal game, so all of those skills end up actually being very, very useful. Don't discount them. Definitely explore them and start using them in really creative ways. Your GM will hate you for it and love you for it. Now we're just about done. We just have to get through equipment, our weapons, and lastly our AC. So we're going to start with our equipment here. There is an optional rule to use equipment packs in this game, and I do highly recommend it. I expect most GMs are going to be using this, though they may have you pick and choose your equipment. We're going to assume you're going to be using one of the equipment packs. Now, the Barbarian equipment pack comes with a number of items, and we're just going to sort of jot them in here. A few of them require some rolls to define how many torches we get and that sort of thing. So we'll start with a backpack. You get a coin pouch, a bedroll, and rations for 1d6 days. So let's find out how many rations we actually get. Okay, so 4 days worth of rations. A water skin, a tinderbox, and 1d6 torches. So let's roll another d6 here. 1 torch. A totem object, antitoxin, which is really useful, with 1d2 doses. So let's roll that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll a d6, and we're going to do even and odd. Odd is 2, or I'm sorry, odd is 1 dose, and even is 2 doses. So 2 doses. And then we get an option of either a spear or a short bow and 10 arrows. Now this is a barbarian. Personally, I would go with the spear. Maybe down the line, go for a couple of axes or something else like that, but we'll start with the spear. Moving on to our weapons and our AC. So we have a handy dandy little spear here. It doesn't have any bonuses to hit, at least not when being used one-handed. The damage is 1d6 or 1 six-sided die plus 1. And there are quite a few special properties on this thing. So you get plus 1 damage if you're using 2 hands. Additionally, it can be thrown up to 50 feet. And lastly, you can make melee attacks out to 10 feet. And lastly, we need to fill out our AC. So you'll note we don't have any armor. The equipment packs that we start off with in this game don't always include it. And armor is not necessarily cheap in this game either. Again, it is a fairly deadly game. So armor is calculated as a base of 10. If you have no armor, you have 10 AC, and that is modified by your dexterity. Now, in our case, we don't really have any dexterity. We don't have any dexterity mod. So in our case, it's just going to be an AC of 10. I suggest avoiding getting hit if possible. Make use of those martial exploits. Rescue exploits are really handy. And that'll pretty much wrap up our character sheet. It's a very, very simple system, and once you've done this a couple of times, you'll be able to fill out this character sheet in like 5 minutes. I hope you have a great time playing, and I hope to play with you soon.